Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this ABC 7 Town Hall. I'm Jesse Kirsch. Like many of you at your homes, I am coming to you from my living room right now. And you can see we have a whole panel here of education experts across the fields who have joined us generously with their time this afternoon to talk about a whole bunch of issues. I know this is a really uncertain time for a lot of you, whether you're looking at going to high school next year, going to college next year, graduating college, or you're somewhere in the mix there. What is going on right now across the country and around the world with this coronavirus pandemic is certainly impacting your education and what you're going to be doing in the years to come. So we wanted to bring this group together to try to answer some questions that I have been hearing, that I've been thinking about as I've been reporting on this, that they're hearing from students and families in their communities. And we hope we'll have a chance to hear from some of you as well. So we put it on Facebook, and I'll just remind you, as always, you can tweet at me at Jesse Kirsch ABC7, and I will try to get to some of your questions as well. And we have a whole bunch of questions to ask these great folks. But first, we're just going to introduce everyone briefly. So to our panelists, I'll just introduce you by name, and if you could just give us a little wave, and then we'll take it from there. So first off, we've got Amy Thompson. Hi, Amy. So I've been talking with Amy a bunch in recent weeks. She is the president of the Illinois Association of College Admissions Counseling, and obviously there's been a lot of change with how people are looking at their college decisions. So she's been a great resource. We also have Anna Pavicevic, principal at Amundsen High School, part of Chicago Public Schools. Thank you, Anna. We have Jeffrey Beckham, the vice president of partnerships. Hey, Jeff, with Chicago Scholars, which is an organization here in the city that helps kids from underserved communities and helps mentor them through high school, through college, and getting from primary school to the career field. And finally, Andy Borst, who I've also been bugging a lot lately, the director of undergraduate admissions at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And obviously, he would have just wrapped up having all of those decision letters going out and all of the kids who are making their commitment to the U of I, sending those deposits in and trying to navigate how things have evolved in that space. So we've got a great group here, and I'm very excited. And I think for all the families out there who are watching right now, a testament to all of your efforts that you took the time to be here with us shows that there are a lot of people out there, not limited to just yourselves on your teams and other groups, that are well aware that there are a whole bunch of challenges these kids are facing and are looking to do what they can to help them out. So the first thing I wanted to touch on really quickly is just a little bit of news of day. Something that we reported on ABC7 yesterday were AP exam issues. They started this week, and I'm sure there are a lot of families out there who are watching this who know what we're talking about. There have been glitches for some people uploading their answers, and from each of your perspectives, we'd just love to hear from you what experiences you're hearing from the students you work with, and how your teams are adapting around that, whether these scores are going to be looked at differently, or if you're trying to figure out a way to make the makeup tests in June any better. So we'll just kick it off with Amy, since I mentioned her first, and we'll just go round robin here.
Great. Well, thanks. So I am not the AP testing coordinator at my school. Yes. But I do know, yeah, there have been a lot of glitches and issues. Probably the biggest issue is just technical aspects of the uploads working successfully. And, the issues of internet connectivity are obviously a huge issue for students. Not everyone has great internet service. So I'm sure that that's adding to it. I know College Board has been trying to get ahead of the technical issues and sending out alerts to students and faculty and counselors to kind of communicate how to fix that. But yeah, it's definitely an issue. There are some really big tests that haven't even happened yet, some of our bigger tests at our school. So they're worried about how that's going to go. And I think from the student perspective, the frustration obviously is, I spent all that time writing all that, and now I might have to redo the whole thing. And this is a really stressful time for kids. So to have to do that again is obviously super disappointing.
So Amundsen High School is an international baccalaureate school, so we don't really give AP tests, but we have had to really consider our college credit bearing assessments that we give through the IB program. And that's either through earning an IB certificate for a specific content area or the actual IB diploma. The International Baccalaureate Organization, which is a nationwide or an international organization, worldwide organization since 1967, is known for being inflexible. And even during times of war in countries, they don't adjust their requirements. Well, this year they did. And so they've made some pretty significant adjustments to how they're going to determine whether or not a student earns credit either through a certificate or with the diploma, earning a diploma. And there's some very complicated internal metrics that I'm not going to get through, but the students will have an opportunity to earn credit, to earn college credit based on their results from their IB diploma exams.
Yeah, I think just coming and looking at it from the standpoint of the students, it is certainly something that's generating more frustration in a time where a lot of the young people are already dealing with having to adapt to going fully virtual, learning that perhaps their graduations are being canceled, and still trying to navigate this while handling the college selection process, the family things that are happening. And so I think, in hope that as we're seeing this, that we're being more cognizant and more generous with the times required. We've seen deadlines extended. A lot of our students, a large majority, are students who are taking and sitting for AP exams, and so we are trying to balance that by providing more support for them on the social and emotional side. And again, our college counselors have really been wonderful in providing that added support. And so I just think that when we see this, it's just another thing to add on top of some of the other issues. But I think it points to Amy's point earlier about really looking at the inequity that exists, especially from a technological perspective. We know a lot of our students, have limited Wi-Fi opportunities. They were going to the library to use computers. When the library is closed, what do you do instead now? And so I think it's just making us really be adaptable and think about how we can pivot in this time. But we want to make sure that we keep the focus and highlight on the students.
From the university perspective, we're watching the videos of students who are trying to submit their information, having written out the answers to the questions, and the frustration they must be feeling in hitting submit, and watching it not go forward. So to students, just know we get it. We're watching it. We see it. If a student takes an AP exam, they've already done what we've wanted them to. They're taking pre-college coursework. They're getting ready to go to college, taking classes that's going to prepare them for success once they're with us. Say a student doesn't do well on an AP exam, or they don't take the exam at all, or they say they don't want to retest in the June exam, and that's okay. If a student does poorly, we're not going to rescind their admission if they score a 1 or a 2 on the AP exam. We're going to maintain our credit policy based off of past years and what an AP's exam score turns into the equivalent once they're at the university. But that's not their only shot to earn credit. We still have proficiency exams by department that a student can take once they're with us. So don't view these AP exams as your only shot to earn college credit.
Awesome. And I think something that you just said toward the end there, Andy, which I'll hammer home, we hear you, we see what's going on. And I think all of you would agree that that is something families should know, is that these issues are not unique to them, whether it's the AP exam or just navigating a strange time. So the next thing I wanted to ask each of you was, what is the one thing it's kind of like a combination question here, both through what you're hearing from families and what you are thinking about the most, independent of what students are reaching out about. What to you is the number one thing students should be focused on right now? And I know there are any number of deadlines out there, depending on whether you're starting high school in the fall, whether you're moving on to college, whether you're trying to figure out your job prospects for the next couple months. But is there one uniting thing that they should all be focused on most? And I guess we'll start with Jeff on it. Oh, Amy was ready to jump in. We'll go back to Amy.
You can go in any order. No, I think the focus should be on everyone is going through the exact same thing. So everyone understands that this is a stressful time, and everyone wants to be as accommodating and understanding as is reasonable. And so communicate with your stakeholders, whoever those are, what your concerns are, let them know where you are, and let them work with you. I think that's really the bottom line, no matter what situation students are facing. No one's out there to be mean or, an ogre and not fair and not reasonable. Everyone wants to, as much as they can, be reasonable. So just know you're not alone and reach out to the people, those stakeholders that are going to have an influence on what happens in your life. And I really do think it'll work out.
Yeah, I just want to tell students and parents, there is a legion, there's an army of people who support you. We are lying awake at night. We are spending probably more hours than we ever have working toward finding solutions, not only to support your academic needs, but most importantly, your social emotional needs. And so what Ms. Thompson said is really important. Communicate with us. Let us know where your head is. When we reach out, respond with honesty, because frankly, my head has been in a weird place too. And so we aren't only sympathizing with you, we're empathizing with you. We are going through the exact same thing you are. And maybe we have some skills and some routines that we can share with you to help you navigate this challenging time. But at the end, we are in this together. We do support you. And we are going to get through the other end if we are understanding what your needs are. We need to know what you need in order to be responsive and adaptive and flexible.
And Anna, while we've got you there, I'll just follow up with what you and I were talking about earlier, where you're hearing from families that there's some friction maybe because everyone is working in a confined space. What have you been thinking of as a high school administrator about how to help make that easier from your standpoint? Maybe laying out lesson plans for parents to work through, so that's one less thing for them to think about at home, or giving advice for how parents and students can maintain space there. What kinds of brainstorming is going on at schools right now to try to take some of that pressure off of families who are in an unknown environment?
Sure. So a couple of things. Number one, we've tried to be as organized as possible as our end and to be as communicative as possible so that parents know what to expect and students know what to expect, and so that they can plan accordingly. When you have a lot of people using one space or one internet server, or even if everybody has their own laptop, the internet connectivity actually changes with more people being on. But the other thing we're doing is really listening to parents as well. And so the same feedback that we're giving to the students by saying, communicate with us, let us know, we're encouraging families to reach out to us and to let us help them navigate logistically and social emotionally the challenges that they're facing, and reminding them that they're not the only parent who's writing and who's saying, I feel overwhelmed. And so that also gives us an opportunity, knowing what those pressure points are in a home, to know when to push forward, when to pull back, when to speak to teachers and to say, at this point, it's really important just to give this student a break, to give them a little bit of extra time, to move forward. Some parents are asking for more work and they feel that there's too much downtime. And so we're actually trying to individualize our responses to students and their families based on the information we're getting from them, and communicating to teachers and saying, here's what's going on that you may not know about. And even though a family may have incredible opportunity and privilege, learning environments require a very specific kind of structure and mood. And so sometimes with the stress in the household, that temperament, that mood, the environment can shift a little bit and have some unintended consequences for everyone involved.
And I'll just share, one of the things we did at Chicago Scholars prior to making any large organizational decisions or statements was reaching out to all of our students. Our staff called every one of our scholars just to see how they were doing this time. And that was after we had done a survey. But we wanted to do personalized reach outs just to be intentional about the connection we were making with the students. And what we found, Jesse, was that our students are very resilient. And I think that translates and transfers across all of the class of 2020. Remember, you're graduates. You got here through hard work, determination, and effort. And now is not the time to move away from those things that got you here. I completely concur with Amy on utilizing your voice, speaking up, being resilient. That means reaching out to colleges and writing financial aid appeal letters during this time. Just, those things work. And the more you use your voice, the more you leverage the communities that really care about you, the higher likelihood you are to have better outcomes of success. I have a story. One of our students, Diana Corino, who is actually one of Anna's students, who is headed to U of I, Urbana-Champaign, is tops in her class, the first in her family to graduate from high school, and really has practiced that self-advocacy in this time where she's leaned in. She's gotten help from our college counselors on FOSFA appeals, and just really dug into understanding her own opportunities as it presented from a college process. And so I'm happy to share with her, and she's even excited about the graduation, the virtual graduation that's coming. So using your voice, advocating on your own behalf, and exhibiting that resilience will get you through to a positive outcome for yourself.
Can I just add one thing to what my colleague is saying? When we don't have students physically present in front of us, we lose a lot of opportunities to read what's going on. Students, when they're in front of us in our classrooms or even walking through the halls, we know them so well. We can tell by their demeanor, by their posture, by their participation, a lot of nonverbal signals, which is 90% of the way we communicate. And so we're trying to do that virtually, and that sometimes can be a challenge. But what my colleague is saying about resilience, the parents, one of the interesting anecdotes that we're getting is parents are writing to us and saying, my children are more resilient than I am. I thought I was more resilient. And, they're asking for as much help. And so, our family, although it always included parents, is now a lot more active and inclusive of parents as we're thinking about what resilience means and, being able to read and interpret. And the parents are eyes for us, and they can tell us what they're seeing and describe what they're seeing relative to some of those nonverbal cues that we miss when the kids aren't in front of us.
One piece of advice that I would give to students is to not rush to make decisions. I think the most important commodity that we have right now is time. And with all of the uncertainty surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic, families want certainty. Our seniors want to know how our class is going to be delivered in the fall. Our juniors want to know, when can I come to campus for a tour, and what's going to happen with standardized tests. And the reality is that we have not made some of those decisions. So we're going to the U of I is going to make decisions about fall classes in mid-June. So it's important for families to not rush to make decisions about what they're planning to do for the fall now. You have time. We're building in structures such that students will be able to make those decisions up until the last minute. And as you're continuing to plan and think about what fall is going to look like, or what your next year of high school is going to look like, give it some time. Things are changing very quickly right now. And if you're trying to rush and make a decision on something, the reality may be different a few weeks from now. So we're going to wait to see how all of this plays out. Have patience. I know it can be really hard right now, but that's what's going to lead to the best ultimate decision for you and your family.
And Andy, while we're on that topic of patience, for folks who have been following along with our reports and those who haven't, we've been focusing on the class of 2020 for a few weeks now. And one of the launching points for us was talking about kids who are graduating high school and trying to figure out what to do about college, because you may have had your dream school lined up, but now it may not be financially viable, or you don't know if you want to go to campus this fall because you don't want to, quote unquote, be wasting a year when you might actually have to sit in your dorm room or be at home in your parents' living room doing classes. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to really dive into what the pros and cons of each of those maneuvers can be. And the first one, which we had talked about a few weeks ago, was gap years. So, in our conversations with Andy, and obviously the U of I has its dates and every school has its own deadline. So reach out to the individual university and college you're looking at for those specific timelines. But a general concept to keep in mind is if you decide to defer, what are the scholarship implications of that? Let's start with that, because I know money is top of mind for a lot of people. So let's start with Andy, because we're just there, and then we'll talk from the high school perspective and what all of you are telling your students. Because if you choose to defer, Andy, some of your financial aid will stay intact, but some of it can change, correct?
So I'll echo what Jeff said earlier about the importance of self-advocacy and restating if students' financial situations have changed. So we know that what the student put on their FAFSA may be significantly different as family employment may have changed. And so there is an additional form process to go through to tell us about what those changes look like from a financial situation. And in terms of delaying admission, right now, we're not getting any more than a normal amount of delayed admission requests. We're right on par with what we've gotten historically. And most of those are related to military service, which of course we're approving as they come in. We've built in a process for students to delay. And the thing to stress here is if you're considering delaying admission for next year, if a high school senior is considering delaying admission, contact the school. The process is very different depending on what institution that you're looking at. I'll talk how the University of Illinois is handling it. We're going to allow students to delay admission for up to 1 semester or 2 semesters based off of a number of different reasons, one of them being impact of COVID-19. But students have until the week before classes start to request that. One of the trade-offs being if a student does request to delay admission, they can't hold their spot and attend another university. If a student chooses to go to their local community college, that is completely fine. You can do that, but you don't get to hold on to your admission spot at the University of Illinois, and you'll have to reapply as a transfer student. And not all of our programs allow for spring transfers. So College of Business, College of Engineering don't allow for spring transfers. There's a lot of nuance that's involved with the process of delay admission and some important restrictions that are different from university to university. So if that's under consideration for the student who's going to college next year, contact the college.
Awesome. So great piece of advice there from Andy. And we're gonna try to move on to another topic because I know we got a bunch of stuff to still get through here. But I think Andy kind of did a good job of hitting a lot of stuff there. Again, it comes down to your individual school situation. So make sure you reach out and ask all these questions. What happens if I do A? What happens if I do B? Because your spot at that school can possibly be up for grabs depending on your decision, and also that financially, which obviously for many families right now is even more important than it already was, and it was very important to begin with. The next thing I want to talk about is what the fall is going to look like. And Anna, we'll begin with you as the principal of a school here in Chicago. What do we, and I know at this point from primary schools all the way up through universities, we don't know in the state and in much of the country what it's going to look like physically. Are people going to be on campus? Are people going to be at home? Is it going to be some kind of rotating system? A lot of that is up in the air, but another part of this, which I'm sure is already being discussed, is academics, curriculum. What is that going to look like? And anecdotally, you hear that some people are concerned the last few months have not been rigorous enough that content is sinking in. So do we have any idea yet from a principal's perspective what the fall curriculum will look like? How much will be a recap versus, all right, if you're in 10th grade now, we're jumping in with 10th grade math, 10th grade history. We're not double checking anything. What's that balance going to look like?
So certainly how school is structured is going to inform that, right? Whether or not students are there in person or whether it's remote. And I do know that CPS is already proactively really trying to put many plans in place that impact not only physical, logistical situations, but also academic. Before we get to the academics, we're really going to need to take some measurements, some temperatures of where students and staff are social and emotionally. And people, I'm anticipating, and I think it's going to occur for me, some degree of post-traumatic stress. And so just jumping into curriculum where we left off or going back too far and making people feel, like their time is being wasted is something that we're really going to need to assess. And we're going to need to look at the social emotional aspects that children and staff are bringing to the table. The other thing that we're going to need to do, even before we think about academics, is teach people how to do school again in the new normal. What does, CPS will transition potentially from remote learning to e-learning, which is very different, from having a full school building maybe to, I don't know what it could look like, but all of those things, the logistics are really going to drive what the academics look like, but you can expect a lot of repetition, a lot of review in order for teachers to have a good grasp of where students are, particularly at the freshman level. ninth graders coming in.
And that actually is what I was just going to follow up with you on is what about those eighth graders? Because we're talking about high school grads and college grads, but there's that class of 2020 who is starting high school in the fall. And especially with a CPS school where they're probably coming from one school and going to a very different environment, could be a different neighborhood, could be totally different classmates. How do you see their experience being different even from the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders who have to adjust to this new system, but already know a lot of the teachers and the staff that they're going to be working with?
I can't remember who said it, whether it was Jeff or Andy, but who said we've got nothing but time right now. I think taking the time, we potentially can have freshmen coming from 20 different schools. And so not only is each individual student experience, based on the school that they come from, driven by that, but also the individual students in front of them based on their individual academic needs. We're going to need to take the time to get to know those students, to get to know them as human beings, to get to know where they are academically, to start slowly so that we can assess and move forward based on where the kids are. Because now we don't know, normally we could anticipate what a certain school, what the kids from school A, B, or C know or can do. But now we don't know because, everything is going to be different and everything has been upended. So I think the notion of being patient with ourselves, being patient with the students, asking the parents for patience and grace is going to be important so that we can get to know the kids.
Awesome. And Jeff, I'll go to you next on this. You were talking about how your team made a call to every student. And for people who aren't familiar with Chicago Scholars, that's about 3,000 kids ranging from high school through college. And you talked about the resiliency. Is there, and obviously a big part of your organization is working with kids who are very academically driven. Are they feeling confident in the material right now? There are a whole bunch of unknowns, but how do they feel about what they've absorbed in the last couple of months? Because you go from being in person with a teacher, getting to see what's going up on the whiteboard, getting to go over notes with them in office hours. And as we're even finding probably doing this town hall right now, doing things in a virtual space just doesn't flow as easily.
Yeah, I think, what we found is that our scholars are very resilient and capable, but they also thrive when they find their community. And what they've done is really leverage their community. It's amazing to talk to scholars and hear how just very driven they were to still push forward to achieve high academic standards, but also to push forward towards their college decisions. They're thinking about what that means for next year. And I think for a large degree, what we heard was that scholars were able to adapt and adjust and make do with what they were presented with. I think, it hit us quickly, right? I think we went from one normal in March, and then in April that changed, and that continues to change. And I think Amy said it earlier, we're hearing from parents that the kids are more adaptable than the parents are. And what I felt more than anything, Jesse, is the disappointment around some of the social aspects. I think that has been separate from the academic components. It's I miss prom. I won't have the ceremony for graduation. Fall, spring sports were pretty much canceled, wiped out. And those are the things that, are crushing to some degree when you hear students speak to that. And that is where, I think, to echo what Andy said earlier, is we all have your back. I shared Diana's story because I thought it was very pertinent to see that we are all in this together, whether it's the counselors, the schools, high schools, and colleges. And as we continue to approach it from that perspective, we're hoping that we make the kids feel that the value that they deserve, and that's it. Like, I don't think that the academic component was a challenge as much as like the social part they missed out on.
That's really interesting point to underscore there, and just remind you about how much goes into being a student, right? It's not just about sitting in that classroom. It's as much, and for some maybe more so, about everything going on around the time in the classroom. The next thing I want to talk about, and we'll go to Amy on this, because as the president of an organization dealing with college counselors all over the state, and as a high school career and college counselor yourself, got a pretty good 30,000 foot perspective, I would think, on the broader issues that are happening. And one of the things that I think is underlying in everything that we've talked about so far is how you keep all of your students on equal footing. Because in all of these challenges, everyone's home environment is different in some way, and the gaps can be very stark. And we talk about when you're in the high school, everyone's in that same classroom. They're sitting under the same light bulbs, right? They have the same internet speed in that classroom. But when they go home, student A could have really expensive Wi-Fi. Student B's family may not be able to afford as much. Student A could have a brand new laptop. Student B could be working on one from a decade ago. And all of that, I think there's concern out there, could make the gaps between different groups of students based on their backgrounds even wider than they already are at a time where everyone is getting so pounded by a variety of factors already. And we have seen that there is disparity based on racial and socioeconomic backgrounds already, just in how the virus is affecting people.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what at your own school and in your community, what is being discussed is ways we fix that, ways we counterbalance that, so we don't get into a wider gap.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think lots of schools are obviously facing this because even though a school represents a community, you still have diversity within that community. And when you talk about things like, socioeconomic and racial, but which are definitely very real, can be very real disparities. The other disparities can be simple things like they have the skills, they've developed some resiliency, and we have kids who still struggle a lot with they haven't that frontal lobe and that all those brain development things that help them manage in times of difficulty. Not all of them are there. And so the benefit, if you're in a school system or just an individual school that allows the counselors to actually have a relationship with their students and know them where those ratios aren't insane, so that you can know your students, as a counselor, which of your kids are probably going to be having the biggest struggle. They're often the same kids who struggle when they're in the building too, but you know them and you know that relationship, and so you make that extra effort to reach out to those students, and you do as much. We try to be as proactive as we can, reaching out to parents to get ahead of the information. We know that they're going to want to have, as well as the students, and communicate that. Email has been a big, major communication tool for us, and students aren't always good about checking it. So we're having to do a lot. We're having to be a lot more innovative and think about ways that we can connect and provide that support. So and it varies from one school to another, and it varies from one kid to another, what each one's going to need. So that's one of the reasons what Anna said, we're probably busier than ever, honestly. And then of course we have people who are at home juggling their young children because they're parents. And so it's there are a lot of challenges, and I wish I had like some great overarching like answer, but it's really an individual case by case basis. And the better services and ratios you can have in your schools of that personnel to the number of students, the better you can individualize that support.
CPS has done a great job closing or narrowing the digital divide. They pushed out over 100,000 Chromebooks, laptops to students. But once you have the laptop, what happens if you're a diverse learner? What happens if you have ADHD? We still don't know, and I hope scientists are watching to see the impact of screen time on the adolescent brain, not only from gaming, not only from social media, but actually from online learning. And so I'm really curious by some of the divides, some of the gaps that are widening based on how students are responding to the technological aspect of learning and what's happening to anxiety levels, what's happening to feelings of anxiety and inability to perform, worthlessness. And so that's a gap that I see that's widening, and we can't really define it by a socioeconomic group, by neighborhood in the city. I mean, I think that's happening in individual homes with individual students, and maybe some kids are predisposed to anxiety, and so this is only amplifying that. But I think we're finding students who never really had issues with anxiety or feelings of an inability to learn or worthlessness that are now starting to have those experiences, and we need to be very mindful and very cautious. And that's why our kiddos need to make sure they're talking to us and telling us how they're feeling as they're going through us and asking us specifically for what they need.
Yeah, I just want to echo that, when people with means catch a cold, people that are marginalized and they get the flu, and in this case, COVID-19. And that means a lot. What we're seeing in this time is that the inequities that existed are now magnified 100-fold. And a lot of our scholars have shown that and presented that. We've had kids whose parents have both been COVID positive and had to deal with that while navigating school, selecting college, and worrying about where meals will come from. And so Chicago Scholars is an organization that focuses on education, has done as much as possible to support scholars wherever we can. And we've done that really through partnerships. It has not just been us on our own. It has been our CPS partners. It has been our counselors, our college partners who have all leaned in together to provide as much support to where we can. And also the community, because we also have had food banks step up, people who have donated laptops. And in this time, if there's a solution, I think the solution is, first, remembering people over everything, our students over everything. And second to that, leaning in and connecting wherever you can, however you can, for as long as you can, because our students deserve
it. Andy, I'll just see if you want to add anything in on that. I know that your office is more about just making sure kids get in the door, but what is going on at the U of I right now in terms of addressing those issues? I'm sure your office gets questions about that from families. And that goes back to what we're talking about with financial aid. What more assistance might be out there?
We have conversations. We have teams of faculty and staff who are working right now on top of, it's not just the question of how is fall instruction going to be delivered, but there are lots of specific conversations about cleanliness of facilities, how we make up for lost learning that happened throughout the pandemic. I'll be curious to see as we go throughout the summer. We're starting summer orientation programs in June, but one of the steps of that is our math placement exams. And so that'll be our first indicator of how much learning has been lost relative to past classes. And then how can we augment our fall orientation as well as adjust our fall instruction such that we're adjusting for whatever loss. I think we're planning to see some loss that happens, but to actually have some data to support if loss is happening. And then I would probably echo, I think it's more important with what Anna and Jeff and Amy have said about academic learning is one component of this, but the socio-emotional component is so much more of an impact on our students. And so we'll see our student affairs units augment their programming to help students as much as possible.
And Andy, on what you just mentioned about placement exams coming up, do you know, and this might not be your department, but do you know if there's any discussion about providing devices if students don't have it, working something out to have more Wi-Fi? Because obviously you're going to have kids coming from all over, and they may not, they may have the same amount of time to take that test, but if someone's internet connection's slower, they're losing seconds, maybe more, on getting a question taken care of.
Yeah, we're working on several different adaptive exams for students who aren't able to meet virtually with their advisor for new student registration, including talking over the phone. And then the placement exam isn't something that has to happen at new student registration. It can happen later in the fall. So we're trying to be flexible with ways in which we're delivering information to students, but as well as the timing in which we're delivering information to students.
And again, I'll take this opportunity to remind everyone out there watching, if you have a problem, reach out to these folks because they can only see so much because they're at home too. So make sure you're reaching out. And these people have all been great, very responsive to me when I've been trying to get information from them. And I know that they know you better. So hopefully they will take your calls and emails with speed. The last question I wanted to discuss broadly with all of you here is something that is going to probably peak up the ears of our college graduates a lot, but there are certainly going to be plenty of high school seniors who are looking to go right into the job force and are not going to be moving on to college either. So I wanted to talk about what advice you have for people who are looking for work right now. And I'm just going to put out some numbers really quickly. So first of all, it's hard to make the economic situation right now look rosy. Unfortunately, in April alone, more than 20 million people in this country lost their job, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And particularly hard hit are the leisure and hospitality industries. So, part of this question for you is, do we think that people are going to be moving away from the fields they're interested in based on what they see has been resilient right now? Are people going to say, well, can I do that job from home? Does that have to be a part of my career path now? And another stark number, just last week, more than 3 million more people filed for unemployment. And then that's the broad economic picture, and it's rough. And then we focus in on people who are coming out of college specifically, and the National Association of Colleges and Employers in an April poll. So we're now halfway through May, right? So these numbers are probably outdated at this point, but the latest data that I have from NACE is 22% of employers polled had to revoke internships, which we know are a huge part of the pipeline to a career, and around 4% of employers were revoking job offers. So full-time offers were being pulled back. It was a small percentage, but what was concerning to the folks I talked about was almost 5 times as many employers. So around 20% of employers were considering having to do that. And again, that's a month ago. And we've now looked at how many people lost their job last month. What advice do you have for students who are trying to figure out the job market right now? And we'll start with Jeff on this, because Jeff, a big part of what you do at Chicago Scholars is helping with that final phase, the students who are in college and are focused on how I'm going to be bringing in money instead of having to pay for that education still, right? How I'm going to take all of that time and money invested and put it to work. That's your specialty with the group. Mm-hmm. What are you telling students right now? Because internships, jobs are drying up, and we're looking at the economy through a new lens right now, because for many people, your safety relies on being able to do work from home.
Yeah. And, one of the things you just echoed, Jesse, we saw firsthand. We lost 80% of our internship placements through our internship program we have this summer for scholars. We went from about close to 100 to 20, and we're really grateful for those 20 and those companies who have provided opportunities. But more broadly, we decided that we wanted to stand up opportunities to help train and prepare scholars in this time for job search. So we've done bi-weekly webinars on everything from interview prep and mastering LinkedIn to how to network properly. And we've kind of rolled out this perspective in a few kind of key points. First and foremost, be patient with yourself, give yourself time, know that this job market is going to be difficult to navigate, but B, know where the industries are hiring. They are still hiring. You can look at consumer packaged goods, healthcare, tech, those organizations that have really leaned in and done remote work well. Those are companies like Zoom and the Facebooks and Twitters, but also the banking industry, which has pivoted really well, and they are able to provide people opportunities to work from home. The food services industries, looking at Amazon and some of our grocery stores, places that you can manage and make decent amounts of careers. And so we've told students to do a skill inventory, make sure that you know what skills you have, which ones you're able to speak to well, know your unique value proposition, be able to communicate that really well, and then think about the technical aspects as you present yourself in these online and virtual forms. So, before we got on the Zoom, the lighting needs to be right. If you can, have a quiet background, still wear your shirt and tie. Think about your presentation. Try to stand out as much as possible through your personality. Those things really matter once you get to that interview. But it all starts with research and homework right now. And to Andy's point earlier, you have time. Time is of the essence. Utilize it wisely. Network online. People are at home and probably more willing to do informational interviews and connect with you. And so you've got a lot of these things to do right now. We're telling our scholars to do all of those. And we've got a webinar. If you reach out to us, we can send it to anyone that needs it to support. We'll email the link to it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I don't know, Anna, Andy, I don't know if either of you has something to add there, or Amy.
Sure. The sad reality is that we have students right now, due to illness and economic hardship due to COVID, are the only students who are working. And that has caused a conflict with, the ability to do remote learning. But what I would say to our students and to our families is that we work very hard at developing partnerships. CPS is very good at helping us have access, like Chicago Scholars, to partners who are helping us build relationships with employers and provide opportunity for our students. Learn, Plan, Succeed is a conversation that counselors are having every day with students. And we're seeing those plans evolve. But the point is, there is a plan. Learn, Plan, Succeed is the opportunity for kids to actually formalize what their next steps are without things being sort of left out, you know, to the universe, to the ether and hoping. But this gives kids an opportunity to converse with counselors who help them make connections with partners about concrete next steps that they're going to take. And so we think that those are tools that will help develop concrete next steps.
And Amy, I think we'll just wrap up with
I
you.
was going to add, really just try to be fast. You know, when times change, jobs pivot. And so, you know, I've heard they're going to be ramping up hiring people for this contact tracing. They're going to need all these people to do this work. So there will be jobs. And so being flexible and adaptive is super important. And really to emphasize what Jeff said, assess your skills, right? What are your skills, and look for the jobs that look for those skills. It isn't about a specific credential necessarily as much as it's about the skills that you possess. And also keep in mind that the job you take now, that doesn't mean that's the forever job. That might be the job for now because that's what's needed, right? And I think that's the other thing that sometimes it's really, there's so much pressure, especially for college graduates, to like find that first job, and you got to do it for a whole year, and you got to be committed so that you have a good resume builder and all that. And that's generally true, but we're obviously in a very unusual time. And so it may be temporary, and that's okay too, right? But getting out there, finding something, showing you got that grit, you're willing to adapt, that's going to really help you within that next potentially longer career type of job. So.
Jesse, if I can add one more thing, I know we're running short on time, but a point to our state legislatures who are about to go back into session. I know most of our focus has been to students and parents, is that our economy is shifting, and historically, as our economy stagnates, education enrollment goes up, and we need to make sure that we have a trained workforce who are able to adjust to this new workforce. You mentioned a lot of the labor statistics, and that there are huge disparities based off of the more education you have, the less likely unemployment was to hit you. And so to make sure that our state is supporting education in many different forms, to make sure that the population of Illinois are prepared to compete in the new economy.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of you for joining us. I think if that last answer right there and everything we've been talking about broadly doesn't say it enough, I'll emphasize the issues that you're all thinking about at home are being discussed, but the more you bring these issues to the forefront by talking to the counselors in your community, your mentors, your teachers, your school administrators, the easier it's going to be for them to help you. And it's clear that there's still a lot to figure out for everybody right now, but hopefully this was helpful for all of you watching. And I'll take a moment and say, and I think everyone would agree with me who's on this call with us, congratulations to the class of 2020. Because even though, and they're all clapping, you can't see it, but they're all clapping right now on the Zoom call. Even though this is a strange time, you have accomplished something very special and under incredibly difficult circumstances that none of us could imagine. We've been talking about in our phone calls leading up to this, how would you handle going through school in a moment like this? So the very fact that you call yourself a member of the class of 2020, I think should be a badge of honor. And just to kind of recap some of the big points here, give yourself time, ask all the questions that you have out there, and keep on pushing through. And we say it a lot at ABC7, and I'll say it right now on this front too. We're all in this together. We are in this together, and there are people out there trying to help you, and we're going to keep covering your stories with the class of 2020 to make sure that we keep everyone thinking about the issues you're facing, so hopefully we can find solutions too. So thank you so much. Congratulations, class of 2020, 8th grade, 12th grade, end of college seniors, all of you done incredible work. We're so excited to see what you do in the future, and we hope you have a great weekend and a great rest of your school year. Thank you all so much to our panelists for joining us. Really appreciate it. We'll recap what we went through here if you missed any of this on ABC7 this afternoon, so be sure to tune into our newscast starting at 4 p.m. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Take care.